Welcome to Madame Raven's. This way to the library. She's been expecting you.
I'm a magician, and I finally got the Mirage to reveal his secrets. By Magpie Quill. Law enforcement refuses to believe the death of the Vegas guard was anything but murder. 3 days later, a gangly local teen was arrested as the prime suspect. The guard's name was Evan Perret, and he had been flown out to Shanghai for a principal shareholder for Gateway Technologies. He'd brought his nephew, Joel, with him. The young boy's horrified expression haunted me. "They're not letting the kids speak," Topaz said on the phone. "I don't believe the suspect really is guilty. I'm sure of it. This is foul play of some other kind." On my way to and fro the Game Kit Internet Cafe, with a small local flower shop, the storefront was decorated with bouquets of roses. The scent of the deep red blossoms was sickening. 2 weeks crept by and I found myself at the gilded wooden double doors leading into the Vegas sky-high lounge. At first I thought the doors were closed, but I tugged on the handle and they inched open with a heavy creak. The lounge was dark and quiet. The only light was from the glittering nighttime skyline beyond the curved ceiling to floor windows. As I entered, the clock struck 7, and the fountains of the Bellagio began their show. The spouts that shot up were deep, deep purple. A small silhouette sat at a round table by the windows. I closed the doors behind me and walked up to it. The faint city sounds drew closer, along with the echoes of Ecstasy of Gold. Set on the table were 2 glasses of champagne. I took my seat. Alex gazed out at the fountains. He was wearing the same outfit he had worn the night after the Gateway party. As the purple lights rose and fell, rusty stains seemed to flicker on his sleeve. "You promised," I said. Alex hushed me. I crossed my arms and he smiled. "Just watch." We watched the fountains in silence again. Only when the lights went dark and the mist settled did Alex turn to me. "I owe you a lot," he said. "You keep saying that. What have I done for you?" "Everything." He spread his arms. "All of this. None of it could have happened without you. 12 years ago on that beautiful night when you inspired me to become something greater." The city lights flickered. Bloodstains appeared on his sleeve again before fading. "Tell me what you are," I said. "I'm an escape artist, just like you." "What did you escape from?" "The Swan Crossing Project." I looked at him expectantly as I sipped from my glass. The champagne had a slightly flowery fragrance. I was glad it wasn't roses. Alex looked away and out of the window. "Fridays before 8, the fountains come on every 30 minutes, yes? Tell me about the Swan Crossing Project." Alex sighed lightly. Then he looked back to me. "How much are you willing to risk, Brian?" "What does that mean?" "It means what I could tell you will change the way you see the world forever. Are you willing to accept that?" I pursed my lips. Alex waited. "You've already changed the world," I said finally. "I've seen feats of real magic. Will the things you tell me change it even more?" "Maybe." "How?" "Would you like me to tell you?" The way he stared at me made me shrink. His expression was serious. "Yes," I said. "Tell me." Alex smiled thinly. I think it's your curiosity that makes me the most curious. Isn't that strange? Perhaps. Now it's time you answer my questions. Alex nodded. To make a long story short, there are other worlds besides this one. Other worlds? Yes. Entire other realities. From what I can tell, these worlds have intersected for brief periods of time throughout history. But the humans who live in this world were the ones with the curiosity to investigate. Other realities? Like alternate universes? I don't know. That's a human term, and I haven't had much reason to look into the countless theories and speculations your kind has come up with for these intersections. The point is that other worlds exist, and I'm from one of them. Which one? Alex smiled. He traced his finger along the rim of the table, and the world around us began to shift. A thick, sweet scent filled the air. Soft trilling sounds fitted at the edge of my auditory perception. The carpeted floor and glass walls fell away, and a bed of leafy, soft glowing fuzz took their place. The city skyline melted into winding thickets and towering spires of sparkling black rock. The night sky brightened into twilight, where sheer white insects, far too large to be dragonflies, fluttered about. If I had to describe it, I would say it looked like a twisted, glowing forest that stretched up and down in infinite canopies. But human words couldn't come close to emulating what I saw and felt. Things chattered from under our feet, like they were talking. The swirling wind whispered. It smelled like musty earth and acid, and then like honey and rain. "This is your home?" I murmured. "This is my home as I remember it," Alex said. "It's just an illusion. I haven't been home in a long time." There was a tremor in his voice. I looked at him in surprise. Alex turned his head to the ground and swiped his hand through the air, tearing the glowing world down by its seams. Everything blurred into static, and a cacophony of indistinct sounds filled my head. By the time it had quieted to silence again, we were back at our table by the lounge windows. The concrete and glass skyline blinked in the night. Alex didn't look up. "What happened?" I asked gently. "They took me." "Who?" "The humans from this world took me," he said, "in what would correspond to your February of 2000. They finally broke through to these other worlds and opened a gate. They came in suited and masked, shouted in strange tongues, and carrying weapons I'd never seen. Many of them died, but more kept pouring in. They bound me up in nets that burned, and then they took me." "And then you escaped?" "No. First they threw me in a prison with others who had been taken just like me, from many different places that I had never known of. The stuff between worlds was riddled with holes. Humans wanted to turn it inside out and pick everything clean. They already had names for us. They'd been waiting and hungering for centuries to keep us in cages like animals in your zoo and study us." "Centuries?" Alex nodded. I sat there and thought in silence for a long time. What Alex was telling me sounded much too fantastical. But then again, so was everything that I had seen happen since I met him. "They called our prison Swan Crossing," he said. "Tell me about it." "What do you want to know?" It was strange being asked that question. "Where is it?" "It's another reality," Alex said. "A smaller place. Something the researchers have taken to call a pocket dimension. How did you escape and get here?" "They took me through their gate." "Why?" "Because they wanted to cut me open and put me in a jar." He spoke bluntly. I bit my tongue. Swan Crossing is like a cage. There were others like me that they kept, and then they took out. I saw what happened to 'em. They're taken apart piece by piece and strung together in giant glass tubes, with their dead eyes still open. The sweet champagne bubbled in my stomach. I did my best to keep my breathing steady. They took me out and away from the others and strapped me to a table covered in plastic. Then they started to cut me with a knife. He looked at me, and his eyes were wild. It burned like hell. Pressure in the room ratcheted up, making my ears pop. A low hum began to resonate from the floor up my bones. A tremor passed through the foundations of the building. Dust rained from the ceiling. Giant cracks raced down the curved glass windows. Alex?" He exhaled, and his breath came out in a plume of sparkling smoke. He squeezed his eyes shut, and his knuckles turned pale as he gripped the edge of the table, slowly twisting in pain. I watched horrified as his skin began to smolder like deep purple embers. Crisscrossing patches of skin peeled open all over his face and hands, curling outward as their edges turned to brittle black soot. The thick, dark ooze underneath bubbled and steamed. The air grew heavy with the scent of roses. Alex shuddered, dripping blood onto the table. Slowly, shakily, he raised his hand and stared down at the deep fissures peeling back his skin. Then he closed his eyes tightly, and everything went still. The humming stopped. The cracks retreated from the window. The wounds closed like flowers after dark, and the burns faded away. He opened his eyes and looked at me as if nothing had happened. "That was how I began to discover my power," he said. "I remember the pain. I remember the screaming. And then, everyone was gone. Ashes. I picked up my pieces and then I ran." I swallowed hard. "Sorry," he said quietly. "I've been training for 10 years and this still gets to me." "It's okay," I managed. "After all you've been through." He cracked a tenuous smile. "You're very brave, Brian. Have I told you that?" Despite everything, I felt some of the blood come back to my face. "I'm flattered." "No, really. I greatly admire your courage and confidence, your conviction in everything you do, your tenacity. Those are such dangerous qualities, but you use them well. And your kindness." His smile wavered. He glanced out the window. "Our time is almost up," he said. "What?" "I'm sorry, Brian. He cast his eyes down to the floor. "I lied to you." "What do you mean? I thought—" My words were cut short by an explosion of pain. Searing white agony, like someone was itching the blade of an axe into the back of my head. I clutched my head between my hands. Deep down my throat, something was beginning to boil. "I'm sorry," Alex said, his voice shaking. "Please, someday forgive me." My stomach cramped up, and I began retching. Bitter fire clawed its way up my throat and seeped through the inside of my skull. I choked out a strangled cry. Outside, the fountains of the Bellagio came back on. A flare of white gold light filled the lounge and illuminated the 2 glasses on the table. One was filled with the familiar rose-colored champagne. The other, on my side of the table, was tinted blue. I tried to find words, but my tongue turned stiff. All sounds turned tinny and distorted. My vision blurred. I felt my body hit the floor. Hands came around my shoulders and pulled me upright. I was inched away from bright purple eyes. My vision jerked into sharp focus for a split second, and I saw they were shining with tears. "Look at me," Alex said, his words echoing in my ears. "Everything about me, all your memories with me and of me. Call them to mind one by one." I coughed out shallow breaths. I didn't know what he was doing. "I'm sorry." I couldn't tell if it was the same person talking. I couldn't discern where the voice was coming from. Not anymore. "I'm sorry I turned this despicable invention against you. I stole it when I escaped, thinking I could use it as a weapon, but I promise that I only want to keep you safe." A strange numbness was coming over me. I could feel parts of my brain turn blank. When my vision flickered into focus again, I couldn't recognize the face before me. "Brian." The stranger in purple smiled, tears streaming down his cheeks. I wanted so badly to ask who he was, but my voice didn't work and everything was numb. The young man gently propped me up against the warm glass windows. Then he removed the deep purple rose from his lapel and pinned it onto my jacket. "Here," he said. "It's something for you, something to be curious about later." I felt his words fade from my memory as he spoke. "Be safe out there, okay?" I had a million questions, but the young man stood up slowly, giving me one last look, and turned and walked away. I heard doors open. By the time they closed, I couldn't remember who had been there. Everything was cold and numb. When I began to feel things again, soft morning light was streaming in through windows. On the round table by the window were 2 empty wine glasses, like I'd been drinking with someone. Perhaps I'd gone a bit overboard, though I rarely took part in more than a glass or two, much less drink enough to black out. I managed to pull myself to my feet. I stood by what would have been my chair and pondered for a long time about who could have been sitting across from me. A small corner of my heart was aching, but I couldn't remember what for. I was about to leave when I noticed 2 things. One was the purple rose pinned to my jacket. The other was a piece of paper on the floor by the chair across from me. I walked over and picked it up. It was a small white strip, laminated to be waterproof. The side facing up had dry blue stains. I flipped it over. Printed on the other side were 3 lines of text. SF Lab Internal. Handle with care. Prototype formula number 1106. Activation window 30 minutes. Swan Crossing. I felt an electric current go down my spine. My thoughts were hazy, but those last 2 words were clear as day. I'd heard them exactly once before. I pulled out my phone and began to dial. End of Arc 1, The Mirage Carnival. Postscript. At this point, it's probably apparent that all of this was recorded after the fact. I first met Alex in 2014, and by now it feels like an eternity has passed since then. Alex. The name feels strange on my tongue. It feels strange to call him that now. For all the promises we made and broke, this wasn't the last time that we would see each other. Far from it. And the only reason I can write about this now is that, after everything that has happened, it doesn't matter anymore that I keep these stories secret. If you would be so inclined, stay around for the journey that turned my world just as Alex promised. If not, I thank you for your time and wish you the best of luck in all your endeavors. So quoth this raven. Thank you for listening, my dears. I so appreciate you coming to listen to my little stories. I hope you all have a lovely Tuesday out there. And special thanks to my Patreon supporters, Ermin, Darren and Jennifer, Laura, and Charlotte Emerson. If you like this, please hit the little button to let me know. If you didn't, hit the little button to let me know. Leave a comment. I'm always glad to talk with you, my darlings. I'm open to suggestions and criticisms, critiques. If you have not subscribed, please do so and ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. And I will talk to you next time, my darlings. Farewell.